Waiting. Waiting in silence. Waiting in the dark. Waiting for the moment to remind the galaxy of who they were. The battle was over, yet the silence that followed was louder than war. The Empire's fleets had failed. The object had walked through their fire like it was smoke, and then it vanished into the black once more. No wreckage remained, only fear. Fear spread faster than light. On every ship and every barracks, the whispers grew. "It is human," they said. "The lost children of Earth have returned." Some laughed nervously, calling it madness. But most felt the truth in their bones. This was no alien shadow. This was the echo of a people who had learned to endure when no one thought they could. Across the Empire, worlds listened to the rumors. On planets enslaved for generations, hope began to rise. For if this mysterious object could defy the Empire, perhaps others could too. Rebellions that had been silent for decades now began to stir again. The very idea of the Empire's weakness was enough to spark courage. The Emperor raged in his palace. He demanded more fleets, more weapons, more blood. Yet even as he shouted, he felt the shift in the air. He ruled through fear, but now his fear was greater than anyone else's. He could order ships to fight, but he could not make them believe in victory. The admirals knew it too. Their once proud voices now carried doubt. Their fleets launched with hesitation. Their soldiers looked over their shoulders, wondering when the object would come again. Every sensor blip, every flicker of light in space made hearts pound. Was it here? Was it watching? Attempts to strike back ended the same way. Fleets were sent, but they never returned whole. Some ships vanished without a trace. Others limped home half destroyed, their captains broken, their crews whispering of a hunter too fast to follow. The Empire's strength was bleeding out one battle at a time, and still the object never spoke. No demand, no threat, only silence. That silence became its greatest weapon. For the Empire did not understand it. Every empire needs to name its enemy to give it shape. But how do you fight what has no signal, no ID, no origin? How do you defeat something that erases your ships without even leaving a shadow? The archivist who had warned them of humanity was summoned again. His words were softer now, but heavier. "This is not an invasion," he told the council. "This is a reminder. Humanity is showing us they are alive, that they are stronger than before, and they do not need to shout to prove it." His words unsettled the admirals, because deep down they knew he was right. The object was not trying to conquer the Empire, it was breaking it from the inside. Fear was doing the work of war. Worlds under imperial chains began to rebel openly now. Some tore down the Empire's banners. Others refused their taxes and supplies. They believed the humans would come for them, free them, protect them. The Empire could no longer control the story. The galaxy was whispering a new name: humanity. The Emperor sat in his throne, his hands trembling behind clenched fists. His empire stretched across the stars, but it was cracking like glass. Not because of armies, not because of fleets, but because of one ship, silent and alone. A ship that carried no flag. A ship that carried no signal. A ship that carried only the weight of history. The Empire had spent centuries building fear into every world it touched. Now that fear had turned back on them, and they could not stop it. In the dark beyond their reach, the object drifted onward, unseen but always felt. It had no need to destroy the Empire in one strike. The collapse had already begun. The galaxy had grown quiet. After every clash, after every vanished fleet, silence was all that remained. The Empire still stood, but it was hollow now. Its banners still hung across 1,000 worlds, but the fear that once gave them power had turned to dust. People no longer whispered of the Emperor. They whispered of the object. The nameless ship, the shadow that erased fleets, the echo of humanity. On the edge of imperial space, another fleet prepared for battle. It was their largest yet, a desperate attempt to prove their strength. Hundreds of ships formed a wall of firepower. Every cannon was charged, every missile armed. The admiral swore they would not fail. And then, it came. The object appeared out of the black like a flicker of light. Calm. Silent, alone. The Imperial fleet opened fire in a storm of flame. The darkness lit up brighter than a sun, but when the fire cleared, the object still drifted forward. Untouched, panic spread. Captains shouted orders. Ships broke formation. The admiral screamed through the comms, trying to hold the line. But the crews no longer believed. They were fighting something they could not understand, something that felt less like a machine and more like a ghost. And then, for the first time, the object spoke, across every channel, every frequency. A voice filled the void, calm, steady, human, no ID, no signal, no origin. The words rang like thunder in the silence. Crews froze where they sat, their eyes wide, their hearts pounding. You cannot track what you do not understand. You cannot cage what you cannot catch. The admirals stared in shock. This was no alien monster. This was no phantom. This was human will sharpened by centuries of silence. We are not your enemy unless you make us one. We are humanity, and we have come home. The voice ended, and then the object moved. One beam of light shot across the void, precise and silent. A dreadnought, the pride of the Imperial Navy, vanished in an instant, gone without a sound. The rest of the fleet broke. Ships scattered in every direction, captains abandoning their posts, crews screaming to escape. The admirals gave no more orders, for they too were silent, their courage shattered. The object did not chase. It did not slaughter the survivors. It simply drifted past, leaving the ruined fleet in chaos. It had delivered its message. Nothing more was needed. Across the galaxy, the transmission spread. Every colony, every world, every slave, every free being heard it. The Empire tried to cut the signal, but it was too late. The words had already taken root in the hearts of billions. Humanity was alive. Humanity was powerful. Humanity had returned. On distant planets, chains began to break. People who had bowed their heads for generations now stood tall. They painted a single word on walls, on ships, on banners. Human. The Emperor sat alone in his throne, his empire crumbling around him. For the first time in his reign, he felt truly small. His fleets could not touch the object. His words could not silence the rumor. His power meant nothing against the simple truth. He was no longer feared. Out there, beyond the stars, the object disappeared again. Silent. Patient. Watching. It carried no flag, no empire, no crown. Only a voice and a name that once shook the earth itself. The galaxy trembled, for the age of the Empire was ending, and the age of humanity had begun. The admirals scoffed, hiding their unease behind pride. Humans were primitive, their machines were crude. They vanished before they reached half the stars we control today. But the archivists did not back down. Perhaps they did not vanish. Perhaps they chose silence, and now perhaps they rise. The chamber fell into silence. No one wanted to admit fear, but the thought had rooted itself deep inside. Meanwhile, across the fleet, the crews continued to whisper. Pilots in their bunks spoke of seeing flashes of light in the corner of their eyes. Engineers claimed they heard strange signals in the static of their radios, shapes that almost sounded like words. And always, always, the same feeling lingered. Something was watching them. The object had not attacked again, but its very presence was enough. Every time the sensors blinked, every time the alarms chirped, hearts froze. What if it was here? What if it had come for them? The Empire was vast, mighty, unshaken for centuries. Yet in the dark corners of their ships, voices whispered of Earth, of humans, of a forgotten world that might now carry fire in its hands. And though no one would admit it aloud, even the admirals felt it. The Empire had finally met something it could not name. The rumors of Earth spread like wildfire, but the Empire would not allow fear to rule. The Emperor demanded action. His words were clear. End this ghost. Show the galaxy that nothing defies us. And so the trap was prepared. In a lonely stretch of space, far from trade routes and colonies, the Imperial fleet gathered. Hundreds of warships floated silently among asteroids, their hulls darkened, their engines quiet. They waited in shadows, weapons armed, every eye watching the sensors. The admirals were confident. The object had passed through this region twice already. If it came again, the Empire would unleash the full power of its fleet. On the bridge of the flagship, silence filled the air. Officers held their breath as the sensors flickered. A faint signal appeared on the screen, faint but fast. Too fast. The object was here. Now, the Admiral whispered. The void erupted, A storm of fire lit the blackness of space. Hundreds of ships fired at once, unleashing missiles, plasma beams, and energy blasts powerful enough to split a moon apart. The asteroids shattered from the shock waves, scattering into dust. The darkness was consumed by light. On the bridge, the officers stared into the glowing battlefield. The admiral allowed himself a smile. Nothing could survive such an assault. Nothing, but when the light faded, it was still there. The object moved calmly as if untouched. It did not stumble, did not burn, did not fall. It slipped through the explosions like a shadow through smoke. Impossible, one officer gasped. Before panic could spread, the object finally answered, not with words, not with signals, but with fire of its own. A thin beam of light shot across the void. It was silent, almost delicate, like a needle-piercing cloth. It touched one Imperial battleship, only for the ship to vanish. No explosion, no wreckage. One moment it was there, the next it was gone, erased as if it had never existed. The bridge fell into chaos. Shields up, return fire, evasive maneuvers. The fleet tried everything. Missiles flew, cannons roared, yet none of it mattered. The object slipped between attacks with impossible grace, weaving through destruction faster than their eyes could follow. And when it struck cleanly. Another ship vanished, then another. Fear rippled across the comms. The voices of proud Imperial captains now cracked with terror. They had faced rebellions, invasions, even plagues, but never had they faced something like this. This was not war, it was execution. The admirals screamed orders, but their words were drowned in the chaos. Ships collided as they tried to flee. Crews prayed to forgotten gods, and in the middle of it all the object moved like a predator among prey. And then, as quickly as it had come, it stopped. It drifted for a brief moment, watching. The admirals held their breath, waiting for another strike, but instead, the object turned. With a flash of light, it disappeared into the void, leaving only silence. The battlefield was broken. Dozens of ships were gone, erased without trace. The survivors floated in shock, unable to understand what they had seen. On the flagship, the admiral gripped the railing with trembling hands. His voice was low, almost a whisper. "This is no ghost. This is a message." The officers exchanged fearful glances. If this was indeed a message, then who had sent it? And what did it mean for the Empire? Far away, hidden among the stars, the object moved again, calm, steady, unstoppable. For the first time in centuries, the Empire's strength had been challenged, and for the first time they began to understand. They were not the hunters anymore. They were the hunted. The wreckage never came. That was the most frightening part. The Empire was used to fire and ash, to debris fields floating like graves after battle. But this was different. When the mysterious object struck, ships were not destroyed. They were erased. Nothing remained, not even fragments for the engineers to study. On the flagship, the admirals argued for hours. Some demanded to unleash planet-killing weapons. Others insisted on retreat until they understood the threat. Yet all of them carried the same fear in their voices. They had been attacked by something beyond their imagination. Engineers tried to study the traces of data from the battlefield. In the static, in the fragments of distorted signals, they found something unexpected. It was not alien. It was not strange. In fact, it looked familiar. The fragments resembled old human code, patterns of design buried deep in ancient records. At first, the officers dismissed it, thinking it coincidence. But the more they studied, the clearer it became. The object was not alien at all. It was human. Shock rippled through the fleet. Humanity had been written off as lost, their world abandoned long ago. But the design was undeniable. The lines of engineering carried echoes of human thought, human style. It was like hearing a forgotten voice in the dark. On the bridge, one of the older officers, gray-haired and tired from years of service, whispered, "It cannot be. Humans were supposed to be gone. The archivist who had once warned them stepped forward again. His eyes shone with both fear and awe. Gone? No. Humanity never dies. They were silent, yes. Forgotten, perhaps. But destroyed? Never. Not those who lived on a world like theirs. He opened the old records again, spreading holograms of Earth before the council. The blue planet scarred by storms, volcanoes, and endless change, the home of fragile beings who bent but never broke. Remember what was said of them, he continued. They survived fire, ice, famine, and war. Their planet tried to kill them 1,000 times, yet they rose. That is what Earth made them. Survivors of the impossible. The room grew quiet. For the first time, the admirals truly listened. They remembered the stories. How humans spread into space despite their fragile bodies. How they adapted to worlds others could not endure. They had been underestimated once, dismissed as weak. And now it seemed, they had returned carrying weapons that made the Empire's might look like stone tools.
One young officer, his voice shaking, said the words no one else dared. If this ship is human, then it is not just an enemy. It is a warning. If one of them can do this, what happens when there are more? The admirals fell silent. Each of
them imagined fleets of these ships faster than their eyes, stronger than their weapons. Fleets commanded by the very species they had thought extinct. The Emperor was informed again. His fury was endless, but even he could not erase the fear in his council's eyes. He had ruled through power, through certainty. But this was different. This was not a rebellion, not a rival empire. This was a people returning from the dark. And deep inside, though none would speak it aloud, the truth began to settle like a stone in their hearts. Humanity had not been destroyed. Humanity had not been erased. Humanity had simply been. The stars of the galaxy had long been under the shadow of the Empire. Their fleets stretched across countless systems, shining with weapons and pride. For generations, the Empire believed there was nothing left to fear. Every race that rose against them was crushed. Every new technology was absorbed. They had measured the stars, mapped the worlds, and placed their banners on planets that had never known freedom. And so, the admirals and officers sat in comfort, sure that their rule would last forever. They believed they had seen everything the galaxy could offer. No surprise, no threat, no unknown. But then one night something changed. It began as a whisper on the sensors of an outpost near the edge of the spiral arm. A blip, too fast, too faint, almost like a mistake. The technician who saw it frowned and checked again. The system reported an unidentified object, moving at a speed beyond the station's ability to measure. No ID code, no signal, no origin. It was not on any chart. The technician laughed nervously, thinking it must be a glitch. He ran the scan again, then a third time. The result was the same. His voice shook as he called his superior officer. Soon the entire command station gathered around the screen. Lines of red warnings filled the display. The system itself almost seemed confused, unable to lock onto the object. Impossible, the commander muttered. Nothing moves that fast. The report was sent to the Imperial Fleet Command. Admirals across the sector gathered in their war rooms staring at the numbers. They ran the data through their most powerful computers, recalibrating sensors, adjusting ranges, trying everything. Yet the result never changed. Each time the same cold words appeared across their screens, unable to track. For the first time in centuries, the Empire faced something they did not understand. The admirals debated loudly. Some said it must be a natural phenomenon, a comet or energy distortion. Others argued it was a weapon from an unknown enemy. But the truth sat heavy in the room. No natural object could move like that. No known ship could outpace their scanners. Silence fell as one young officer, pale and trembling, whispered, "It moves faster than thought." The words carried a weight that none could dismiss. Faster than thought. Faster than their sensors, faster than their weapons, faster than the Empire itself. The Emperor was informed. His court was filled with fear disguised as arrogance. The minister spoke of deploying fleets, of setting traps, of burning down the skies until this ghost was revealed. Yet none of them admitted the truth that sat deep in their hearts. The Empire had always prided itself on control. Every ship had an ID code. Every world was logged and cataloged. Every people had their place in the records. To find an object with no ID, no signal, and no origin was more terrifying than any fleet of enemies. It was as if the galaxy itself had birthed something outside of their order, outside of their knowledge, and knowledge was the root of their power. Without it, their pride began to crack. The admirals returned to their command ships, eyes heavy with unease. Reports spread like fire across the fleets. Crews whispered in the dark of their barracks. Some laughed, calling it a lie. Others shivered, speaking of omens and curses. But no one could shake the feeling that something ancient, something hidden had stirred in the void. In the silence of deep space, where even light takes centuries to move, the object continued its journey. Silent, unseen, unstoppable. And the Empire, for the first time in 1,000 years, knew fear. The Empire did not allow mysteries to survive. For them, every question had an answer. Every shadow had to be burned away. The unknown was not a wonder, it was a threat. And so when the object appeared again, faster than their sensors could hold, the decision was made. The fleet would hunt. In the hangars of the Imperial flagship, interceptors stood ready. Sleek silver ships armed with weapons strong enough to destroy a city with one strike. Their pilots were the pride of the Empire, men and women trained to fly through storms of fire. They laughed when they were told of the phantom object. To them, nothing could outrun Imperial steel. Just another ghost story, one pilot said, strapping himself into the cockpit. If it bleeds, it dies, another added with a grin. But their confidence was not shared by the commanders who watched from the bridge. The admirals stood silent, staring at the screens, at the flashing alerts that showed the object's path. It was moving faster than any record in their archives. Still, pride forced them to order the chase. The interceptors launched, wings cutting through the void like knives. Their engines burned bright, leaving trails of light behind them. The pilots activated their scanners, their targeting systems, their weapons. They were hunters, and the prey was somewhere out there. But when they closed in, there was nothing. The scanners reported empty space. The object's trail dissolved like smoke, leaving only static. The pilots cursed and recalibrated. They tried again. And again. Each time their systems showed nothing but shadows. "Command, I'm losing the signal," one pilot shouted, his voice shaking through the comm. "It's right in front of me. No, wait, it's gone," cried another. Then a flash. Just a flicker of light like a reflection on glass. One pilot swore he saw something dart across his view, just beyond his reach, like a hand snatching away before he could grab it. Missiles were fired. Energy bolts lit up the void. The explosions burned bright, shaking nearby asteroids into dust. But when the light cleared, the hunters found nothing. The object had slipped through their net as if it were never there. And then it happened. One interceptor's signal cut off mid-sentence. No explosion, no wreckage. One moment the pilot's voice was on the comm, the next moment, silence. His ship was gone, vanished, as if space itself had swallowed him. The remaining pilots screamed warnings, but none knew what to fire at. None could find an enemy. Fear, sharp and bitter, filled the comms. These were men and women who had faced death in battle without blinking. But this was different. They could not fight what they could not see. On the flagship, the admirals watched in horror as one of their finest disappeared without a trace. There was no data left behind, no energy spike, no debris. The records showed only a line of text. Signal lost. It was the first Imperial ship in centuries to vanish without a cause. The interceptors were recalled. The mission was called a failure, but the word felt too soft. Something had happened out there, something the Empire could not explain, and in that silence the fear grew deeper. Whispers ran through the lower decks of every ship. Sailors spoke of a ghost, a shadow faster than light. Others called it a curse, a punishment for the Empire's endless hunger. Some even believed it was alive, a being of pure energy playing with them. The admirals tried to silence the talk, but even they could not shake the truth they had seen. One of their own had been taken, erased without a sound. And somewhere out in the endless dark, the object moved again. Silent, untouched, always just out of reach. The hunters had become the hunted. The loss of the interceptor shook the Empire more than they wished to admit. For the first time in generations, their ships had been touched by something outside their control. No wreckage, no trace, just silence. The commanders called it a malfunction. The admirals declared it an accident. But the crews knew better. Fear was growing like a shadow in every corridor. On the flagship, the War Council gathered once again. Holograms of admirals filled the grand chamber, their faces grim. The Emperor's voice echoed across the chamber like thunder. Find it. Destroy it. Nothing escapes the Empire. Orders were given, fleets repositioned, traps prepared. But the unknown object continued to slip past them. It moved through asteroid fields, across sensor nets, even through heavily guarded systems, always too fast. Too clever, never leaving proof of its path, and so, in the silence that followed, rumors began to bloom. Among the lower officers, whispers carried from bunk to bunk. Some said it was a ghost ship, a spirit born from the screams of worlds the Empire had crushed. Others believed it was a weapon built by a forgotten enemy, waiting in the dark for revenge. But one rumor carried more weight than the rest. It was spoken softly, almost in fear of being overheard. A name, old and nearly erased from memory. Earth, many dismissed it immediately. Earth was an abandoned rock, written off by the Empire centuries ago. Its people were fragile, weak, unable to endure the harshness of the galaxy. No one had heard of them in ages. Their world had been marked as silent, a dead system with no threat, no future. But some officers remembered fragments of old reports, records that described humans as survivors, creatures born on a world of fire, storms, and predators. A death world, they had called it, a place so violent that most species would never last a day on its soil. Yet humans had not only survived, they had thrived. They had adapted to heat and cold, to hunger and sickness. They had learned to fight, to build, to endure. The thought spread like a spark in dry grass. Could it be that humanity had never died, only disappeared? Could it be that they had returned stronger than before? One old archivist, summoned to the fleet for his knowledge, trembled as he spoke before the council. His voice shook, but his eyes were certain. Do not laugh at this name. I have studied the old records. Humanity was different. Their world forged them in ways we cannot understand. They do not yield. If this is their work, then the galaxy itself may tremble.